So, someone asked in the comments not too long ago what we mean by essentially the term free trade and what is a free port and what's the difference between them. Well, first of all, a free port is something physical. Free trade, on the other hand, is a lot more difficult to actually define because when I say something like free trade, I mean something like what's going on in the EU, where you have multiple countries recognising and working together to either lower or eliminate tariffs completely and have a mutual recognition of one standards. And of course, that obviously applies to regulations as well. Now, that's what I mean, and it's probably like the left-wing view of what a lot of leftists think when they mean free trade. Now, of course, again, it is quite different because, again, there are different stripes of leftists. So other leftists might vehemently disagree with my assessment on that. I fully expect them to. Like I say, it's quite difficult, but generally take that as probably what is an overall view of what the left would think, even though, again, it's not. And then we go on to the right-wing point of view. And this is specifically pointing towards, again, the Brexiteer and the free market fundamentalists, because they're the ones who are currently in charge. And to them, they would agree that they wanted zero and to reduced tariffs on goods. But that's it. They just want 0% tariffs. And that's what we're seeing in a couple of these trade deals. And that's where this idea of free trade goes almost all the way back to, again, the 18th century, where, again, we had this empire. We had like this almost captive market of colonies where you could dictate prices and what they would buy and who they could buy from, mainly us. So British industry pretty much had a captive market because there was no other competition in those colonies except you buy the British goods, and that's it. So that's sort of what they want to go. And like I say, the topic of free trade itself is really, really difficult. But overall, if you took that as a basic view of what free trade is, and again, depending on who says it, like I say, we had Andre Walker, and I said, well, what does he mean by when he says free trade? Again, we don't know. But we're not talking about free trade today. We are talking about free ports, because ultimately these are going to be, I think, the topic of quite a bit of discussion over the next couple of years. And here's the thing. We've done this song and dance before, especially in the 80s. Margaret Thatcher created over 12 free ports in the UK. And they existed almost right up to the 2000s, I think, at some point. I can't remember when the last one was officially done away with. I think there might even be some left, I think, from that time. But ultimately, those free ports ultimately failed to actually materialize what they promised to do, of create jobs in the local area and energize the economy in that area. And they failed to do that. The only two that actually, again, succeeded, as we said before, was the one in Sunderland, which was, again, because Nissan came to there, and, of course, the one down in London in the Isle of Dogs, where Canary Wharf got essentially built, and you've got the London City Airport, and etc., etc. So free ports aren't necessarily a good thing, and again, these new 8 free ports, as there is in, I'd like to say, I think the closest one to us would be the Teesside one. I think would be where the closest one to us is. So they're not exactly 100% the best thing, and that's what we're talking about today, because these are going to be a very heavily discussed topic, especially for the next couple of years. So before we jump into that article then today, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. Also down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you to everyone who does support the channel that way. So, this comes from the North East Bylines. And the title is "A Teesside Freeport Will Not Level Up the North East." The government intends to create 8 free ports, including one at Teesside. These aim to provide a, quote, "an unprecedented economic boost to across the United Kingdom and a narrowing of regional inequalities. A Teesside free port will not level up the North East." So what are free ports? Free ports are similar to what have been previously described as free zones or enterprise zones. Businesses set up inside free ports and they will benefit from the exemption from import tariffs as well as reductions in other taxes and national insurance contributions. If free ports were such a good solution, why have we not tried them before? Sadly, the answer is that we have tried them before, but they did not work. The first free ports opened in the 1980s under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Another Conservative-led government closed them down, and then free ports have basically not led to any levelling up. An analysis published back in 2019 concluded that the UK has a higher level of regional inequality than 28 other ODEC countries, and inequalities are between local authorities are even higher than inequalities between regions. Income inequalities are interlinked with inequalities in health and education. The downside of free ports is that they tend to shift jobs from other parts of the UK instead of actually creating new ones. They also reduce the tax revenue that supports our public services. And according to some commentators, free ports are just a gimmick. David Cameron also experimented with his own version of free ports that he called enterprise zones. John Talbot argued at the time that we understand that this type of incentive as a device for political marketing rather than actual serious incentive to actually resolve local or regional inequalities. So what would actually be an alternative to a free port? The alternative to free ports would be state interventions. This would also address the factors contributing to low income in the left behind areas, poor educational performance and no access to lifelong learning, inadequate infrastructure, inadequately funded local authorities and poor health. So investing in health is essential. The life of men in the UK is in the most deprived parts is 11.3 years shorter than the lowest regional life expectancy for both males and females. In the North East, how can local authorities actually address the deprivation with reduced budgets? Councils in deprived areas face far greater restrictions in their budgets than anywhere else. So, what about education? Improving education is also a critical strategy, as inequalities in opportunities explain some of the regional differences in economic outcomes. However, with successive Conservative governments, schools are serving more deprived areas have seen greater reductions in spending per pupil. So once again, where is the levelling up? So transport is another key that is linked to these areas as well. So a good transport infrastructure is critical, but our government is spending on transport is still favouring the London area and the South East. So what about these Brexit benefits? Is this really one of them? So Boris Johnson has claimed that the ability to create free ports is a benefit of having left the EU. This is not true. We always had free ports in the UK whilst we were in the EU, and there are currently 80 free zones located across 21 EU member states. However, the experience with free ports across Europe has led to concern that some free zones are associated with money laundering, tax evasion and tax avoidance. The North East and other disadvantaged areas are about to lose a significant stream of funding which came from the EU. These are the Regional Development and Social Funds. Boris Johnson's government intended to replace the EU scheme with new incentives, such as the Town Fund, which will benefit 45 constituencies and 40 of which have at least one Tory MP. This has led to the accusation of pork barrel politics. and they are now in competition for businesses to relocate based on tax cuts and deregulation. As we would see this with, we would also see this with freeports. We may also end up as losers as well. This is why, at an international level, the new US president has launched an incentive to curb tax havens and force companies to pay their fair share of tax. Of course, this week we saw the Conservatives heavily decide not to do that. And of course, going into the G7 as summit, I think we are the only country that has said that we do not intend to actually sign up to that. So what is an actual proper alternative to a free port then? So alternatives to free ports could be what is known as place-based policy. This is an approach that takes into account local opportunities and resources and engages local institutions and local leaders. Reducing regional and local authority inequalities is actually quite difficult, and there is no easy off-the-shelf solutions. Free ports may have a local impact, but they will come with far greater negative consequences for other region-wide initiatives, and others are needed to actually shore up and ensure that Boris Johnson's promise to level up the north is followed through. But of course, as we discussed before, that ain't going to happen. We've seen these exact same promises literally trotted out by David Cameron. And again, when you've got all this money with this town development fund, which are specifically going to Tory-held seats, that ain't good either, because at the end of the day, the Southern MPs are also going to realise, hey, why are all the Northern seats getting this money? Shouldn't we get some money too? And sooner or later, there's going to be a bruise up, shall we say, between the Northern Conservative MPs and the Southern Conservative MPs. Because, like I say, the Southerners are soon about to be shouting about, oh, we can't spend all this money. We've got to pay back all this debt we made during the pandemic. So, as always, that's what essentially a free port is. They are not going to be good for the UK. They are going to do and essentially damage the regions that they end up being in. And essentially, if you live like close to a free port, then you may actually benefit. The problem is that it will basically drain the region of other resources and lead to, less funding for councils and lead to greater inequalities in the region. Like I say, there needs to be really focused solutions on this. And like I say, as it said in the article there, one of the best solutions that we have seen to do this is government intervention. But we have a Tory government, and the last thing they intend to do is actually have government intervention. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, tomorrow we will be having our good morning walk. So I will see you tomorrow bright and early at 8 o'clock. And of course, thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.